In February of 2005, Jerry Cantrell, Mike Inez, and Sean Kinney reunited to perform a benefit concert in Seattle for the victims of the tsunami disaster that had struck South Asia. Now, this was monumental because it was the band's first live performance since 1996, where they last played with Layne Staley. So that's 9 years since the band had done anything live. And it was the first time playing those Alice in Chains songs without Layne Staley, of course, who tragically passed away in 2002. So it was a massive moment for Alice in Chains. And from this one gig came more shows over the following months. And this is where in 2006 we get the introduction of new Alice in Chains singer and guitarist William DuVall. And the rest, as they say, is now rock and roll history. Black Gives Way to Blue is Alice in Chains' fourth studio album and was recorded between October of 2008 and March of 2009 at Studio 606 in California and Henson Recording Studios in Los Angeles. Black Gives Way to Blue was Alice in Chains' first studio album in 14 years, with their last being their self-titled record they released back in 1995. So it had been a long time in between drinks for the band, and while there may not have been a lot of music going down in that time, something of huge significance obviously had happened. And that, of course, was the death of former singer and frontman for the band, Layne Staley, and that was back in 2002. So it was the first time Alice in Chains would be recording a new album without Staley. With the introduction of William DuVall coming into the band, Cantrell always wanted to make it clear that there was no replacing Layne Staley, and that was not what they were trying to do. But rather, it was just all about finding a new way to continue on.
He's himself. He's not trying to be Layne because that's just an impossibility, and it was never the intention to replace him. If anything, it would be to try to add and to honor what has come before and try to add to that legacy. You know what I mean? And that's a sizable challenge, and for him to take that on, and for us to feel comfortable doing that, I think this band has always been a two vocal band where two kind of make one, and I think that things are like that now, although they're obviously different, and it's never going to be the same relationship. That relationship that we had with Layne, that still lives through the music, you know what I mean? So being able to play that stuff, we take him with us wherever we go, and William has been able to, honor the material that we did with Layne and do it in his own unique way. And we've also grown into now being able to make some new music together that still has that same fingerprint, that same thing, and even though it is something a little different, and that's okay. It feels right to us. And
DuVall was an old friend of Cantrell's. They had met in Los Angeles in 2000 through a mutual acquaintance, and DuVall's band, Comes With the Fall, was both the opening act and also Cantrell's backing band during the tour for his second solo album, Degradation Trip, in 2001 and 2002.
And the thing too is I'm not trying to do a Layne, you know what I mean? Like, I loved Layne, I loved his work, and one of the things that I loved about him was how individual he was. He was just being himself. So that's what I do. And from the get-go, that was kind of the only way I saw, is I'm gonna go out here and do it my way, and whatever happens, let the chips fall where they may. And
what's the trip? There's nobody else that sounds like your band.
That's a good thing.
It's just, I know, it's like instantly recognizable.
I know.
Recording began in October of 2008 at the Foo Fighters Studio 606 in Northridge, California. That's right, Dave Grohl offered his studio to Alice in Chains for them to record their album, so pretty cool. With the album being produced by well-known music producer Nick Reskulinich.
The little slide thing on that?
Just like you just did.
All right.
Yeah.
So what was wrong with that?
One more time.
Yeah, well, Nick's a really talented guy, and he was who's a friend of Dave Grohl's, and Dave obviously is a good friend of ours, and been very supportive of us during the whole journey that we've taken here, and he suggested Nick as somebody we might want to talk to, about recording the record, and he also offered a studio, which Nick is a partner in as well at the 606 here in the Valley, and so we ended up meeting him, and Dave was completely right. He was he has a real enthusiasm for what he does, and he brought a lot to that record. I got to give him a lot of credit for how that record sounds.
Sorry.
Black Gives Way to Blue was very much a collaborative effort from all 4 band members. Of course, Jerry Cantrell is the main songwriter in the band and sang a lot more on this record than he had on previous Chains records. However, the Alice in Chains dual vocal setup that Cantrell and Staley did so well did not change here. They kept that formula going with Cantrell and Duvall producing some very awesome harmonies on this record too. Here, Jerry Cantrell elaborates on that collaborative process with the band.
This has always been a band. It was a band before, and it's a band now, and it takes all of us to make this happen. And any idea that comes from an individual, and I've been fortunate enough to bring in a lot of ideas to the band over a lot of years, gets made so much better by going through the filter of everybody else. The bullshit meter is pretty sensitive, in other words, everybody's got to be able to stand behind it. So, he brought in some really great ideas. There's a song called Last of My Kind that he wrote some really cool vocal lines and lyrics to, and he and I worked on the lyrics and vocal lines on too, and Sean even brought in some really cool musical ideas. Mike had some great stuff, and everybody's really creative, and but the trick is the band has existed for some time, and although every album's got to be a little different, and it's got to kind of serve that sound. So, and the way that happens is by it kind of passing all of us, not just one individual bringing in an idea. It's got to pass the whole team, so.
Black Gives Way to Blue is 11 tracks of hard, heavy rock that hits you right where it's meant to. With tracks like A Looking in View, Check My Brain, and Last of My Kind. And you also get a couple of quieter moments on this album, with the songs Your Decision, When the Sun Rose Again, and of course the title track, Black Gives Way to Blue. 3 singles were released from Black Gives Way to Blue: Check My Brain, Your Decision, and Lesson Learned. With 2 songs, Check My Brain and A Looking in View, being nominated for a Grammy for Best Hard Rock Performance. The album debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200 and was certified gold by 2010 with over 1 million copies sold worldwide. The cover for the album is an anatomical illustration of a heart surrounded by a black and blue background. According to William Duvall, the cover was Sean Kinney's basic idea, but other members also had a hand in it. Jerry Cantrell explained the album cover in a 2009 interview. The whole thing with the heart, there wasn't a real intention or a reason. It's just a collection of ideas that we put together. To me, we had our hearts broken by losing Layne and losing ourselves. And also, it took a lot of that to get through this process, and to even take the chance, and to stand up and risk. It celebrates his life. Jerry Cantrell, Sean Kinney, and Mike Inez also thank Layne Staley in the album's liner notes.
So I guess the I mean, anybody can relate to it. I'm sure you've lost people in your life, and you move on. You continue to live, after a period of time or whatever, and things change, and you just continue to do what feels right,
I don't wanna feel no more. It's easier to keep falling. Imitations are pale. Emptiness of tomorrows, haunted by your ghost. Being that this was the first record that Alice in Chains recorded without Staley, of course, his presence was going to be heavily felt here, and it was. Drummer Sean Kinney said, "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of him. A lot has happened since 1995. A lot has happened in our lives, and we've never talked about it or discussed it publicly. But a lot has happened since the last record, and it's on this record." And that's where we come to the title track, Black Gives Way to Blue. The song is track number 11, the final track on the album, and is written specifically about Layne Staley.
Well, the title track obviously is an important one, and Layne was very important to us, and he's still a part of this and always will be. We're really happy to have the opportunity to continue and to make music together, and so that song was, it was kind of one of those things that just happened, like a lot of songs do, and that came out, and it expresses stuff that expresses feelings that Sean and Mike and myself went through personally and didn't really talk about publicly. So it was kind of putting that into words. It was pretty heavy, and
the rest of the album had already been recorded, so the song Black Gives Way to Blue was the final track that was cut for the album. The band recorded the song, but they needed some keyboards on it. The band was still deciding on who should play on the song when longtime Alice in Chains assistant Todd Chess suggested none other than Sir Elton John. Cantrell ended up writing an email to Elton John asking him if he would consider playing on the track. And after hearing the song and knowing the situation that the band was in, trying to move forward, Elton John accepted. And as a side note, something that kind of brings this whole thing full circle, Jerry Cantrell and Sean Kinney shared that Layne Staley's first concert that he went to with his stepdad when he was just 7 years old was actually Elton John. Here, Jerry Cantrell talks about what it was like walking into the studio and seeing his music and his lyrics sitting on Elton John's piano.
We were supposed to meet him at a certain time, and he was late because his football team was still in a match or something, and so it was kind of cool because we got to walk into the studio and hang out for a bit before he showed up, and one of those real concrete memories was walking into the room and seeing my lyrics and my music on his piano. That was pretty heavy. Like, oh my God, that was for real. That was pretty great. Yeah.
So, Black Gives Way to Blue. This is a really cool Alice in Chains record. Totally monumental in the fact that it was the first studio album that they had done since '95. That's 14 years. Yes, they had released Unplugged and other releases and stuff like that, but in terms of studio albums, the last one was that Tripod album that they did in '95, and of course, Black Gives Way to Blue, the first one they did without Layne, like a totally new Alice in Chains in a lot of ways. The core of the band is still there. 75% of the band is still there, if you want to look at it that way, 3 of the 4 members. And you have the new element with William Duvall just totally up against it, right, with everybody comparing him to Layne. I mean, he's in a no-win situation, so I think he's done pretty good. He's still in the band all these years later or so. He's stuck it out pretty well, I would say. And like Alice in Chains said, it was never about replacing Layne. There is no replacement for Layne, but they're just continuing on in a new and slightly different way, right? But the music on this album is awesome. It's hard and heavy, but you get kind of a new sound out of it too, a slightly newer side of Alice in Chains. Like, it's not the 90s anymore, you're into the 2000s, so they slightly evolved their sound and slightly more of a modern take on Alice in Chains, you could say, while still very much maintaining that raw Alice in Chains sound in there too. And of course, without Staley, it's going to be a bit different, right? You had several big hit songs from this album, tracks like Check My Brain, Your Decision, Lesson Learned, and then more of that heavy Alice in Chains sound with songs like All Secrets Known, Last of My Kind, and A Looking in View. Big guitar sound, big vocals is what you get here on Black Gives Way to Blue. Great production. And as we say, the final track on the album, track number 11, dedicated and written solely for Layne Staley. The one time that Jerry Cantrell sat down and wrote a complete song to Layne, about Layne, for Layne. This is it, so check out that track if you haven't already. And just topped off what was an amazing comeback for Alice in Chains. Everybody thought they were dead and buried. In a lot of ways, they were. Been out of the scene for so long, but so cool how Cantrell, Inez, and Kinney could come back together, find a new lead singer and William Duvall, and just keep on pushing on. And with some very impressive results, I might add. That's Alice in Chains, Black Gives Way to Blue.
Lay down, black gives way to blue. Lay down.